dead for 3 hours, and coming back profoundly changed. All this and more in this episode of Real Life Angel Encounters. Angels, we all have them. They're our unseen guides, our companions, our teachers, and they're all around us. Sometimes they make themselves known in the most miraculous ways. Join me, Level 3 QHHT practitioner, angel communicator, and Reiki master, Christy Clemens Hoffman, with stories from real people who have experienced uplifting phenomena and real-life angel encounters. Welcome back to Real Life Angel Encounters. This is the podcast for people who like the paranormal with positivity and actual spirits in their spirituality. Love that you're listening now. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. But before we get into it, I would like to ask a huge favor. And that is, if you've got Real Life Angel Encounters, the book, please, please, please write a review. And if you don't have the book, well, you can order it on Amazon. You can order it on Goodreads, on barnesandnoble.com, or my favorite, which is bookshop.org. And order your copy now. And please, please, please do write a review. It seems like a simple thing, and maybe it is, but reviews really help other people find this book. And just like they do when we rate and review the podcast, it helps more listeners and more readers find this content. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme, right? The more listeners we get, the more readers we get, the more people are sharing their stories so that you have them to listen to. So please help this out by talking about it, sharing it, writing that review, subscribing to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, wherever you access this content. Please let others know how much you appreciate it and how uplifting you find it. All right, on with this episode. In this episode, I talked to Jonathan Ashford, who experienced a profound near-death experience on May 22nd, 2023, that completely transformed his understanding of life, death, and human purpose. After dying of organ failure brought on by stage 3 sepsis and spending 3 hours on the other side, Jonathan returned with unexplained divine knowledge, enhanced abilities, and a clear mission to help others understand what truly awaits us beyond physical death. His message is profound. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So, on with the episode. Enjoy. Thank you for joining me today, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
You're from Sandpoint, Idaho, which is my second home.
Yes, up here in the woods.
Out
Yes.
in the woods. It's a cute little town. And my dad died in 2022, but there's also my stepmom who's up there, and my sister's family, and grandma, and everybody's up in Sandpoint, and we visit there semi-regularly. So I know exactly where you're coming from there. All right, well, let's dive into this near-death experience. I've had other experiencers on this podcast and my other one, Radiate Wellness. Yours stands out a bit. 3 hours that you were deceased. Wow. Tell me what happened on that day in May.
Give you just a little lead up. I collapsed in a grocery store a couple of weeks earlier, and in 2 weeks, I'd been to the ER 2 times, and they couldn't figure out what was happening. After the second time I was at the ER, I went off the cliff. I actually thought I picked up COVID or something in the emergency room on top of this mystery illness. The night that I passed, my entire body turned yellow, and I didn't know what it meant. But at that point, I had lost about 7 pounds, and I was a tough guy. I figured I was just dealing with the flu and I would power through it. Well, that morning I woke up at 4:30 a.m. and I felt a strange stillness, a peacefulness within my mind, but my body felt very detached in a sense. As I swung my legs out of bed, I tried to make it to the bathroom in my house, which I collapsed. Before I collapsed, I recognized something that I learned about later from a hospice nurse, is you hit a switch or a point in the process of dying where you come to a realization that that's what's happening. And I like to say it grants you a freedom from concern. I wasn't worried about my dog. I wasn't worried about my parents, or I'm too young to die. There was no clinging to life. It was kind of you're washed over in this peace and you just know you're going through the process. And then I collapsed. And I like to call it the long blink. It felt for me, I was carried in like a child that's caressed and wrapped in a blanket, held in safety and love, wrapped in that. And the next thing I know, when I'm opening my eyes in that blank, I am now on the other side, so to speak. So that was the lead up into how I ended up on the other side.
Oh my gosh. So were you living alone at the time? I mean, how did anybody
Correct.
find you?
They didn't. So I didn't realize, it's funny, I'm writing this part in the book, it just finished. I was skeptical. I didn't think I had a near death experience right away. It turns out I had a gallstone get stuck. Never had a gallstone. I was 2 hour a day workout guy, very strict diet, but somehow got a gallstone that doctors missed on 2 ER visits, only to find out within the month that I returned that I have a DNA mutation to pain, which left the gallstone there undetected, so to speak. And after coming back, I found out I had all kinds of organ damage. And then leading into more investigation, I had a doctor finally say, "You went into septic shock. It can kill you. You're lucky." And I started to wonder, well, maybe it did. So after some investigation, knowing that my body temperature was 94 degrees on return, which is hypothermic, but it's also 1 degree body loss for the hours that I was gone, in addition to meeting a being on the other side who informed me that I had passed, I could no longer hide the fact that I had a near death experience. So at that point, I reached out to Dr. Jeffrey Long's foundation to have an investigation into whether I did. And I also ultimately reached out to IANS with my account as well. So coming back to all of this understanding that you can't really run from the fact that you had a near death experience. So
Whoa, whoa. So how long do you think you were laying there on your bathroom floor before somebody took you to the hospital?
nobody did. So interestingly enough, when I collapsed, my skin had turned completely gray. I was too weak to even walk. When I was trying to make my way to the bathroom, I was dragging my right leg. When I reached the sink, I noticed my hands were completely gray and corpse-like. And in that moment, I thought I was hallucinating. I thought, wow, what a crazy hallucination. But it wasn't until I saw my face in the mirror that I realized, and that switch got hit where you realize you're dying, that I collapsed. It was 4:30 when I woke up. It was 7:30 when I returned. But when I did return and did take my temperature while laying on the bathroom floor and seeing the 94 degrees, when I stood up, my face had filled back in a little bit and I had some color. And I had this weird third party presence, like I was behind my and above myself. It was like I had one leg in that world and one leg in this world. And I just went about my day. It never occurred to me to call for an ambulance. It never occurred to me to call for a doctor, nothing. It was like I was healed enough to just get off the floor and continue. It didn't even occur to me that I was laying on my bathroom floor, quote unquote, dead for 3 hours. So it was something that I had put into a box. Nobody needs to know about this. Nobody needs to hear about it. You can go to the grave with this. And it wasn't until strange things started happening in and around my existence during that first month returning that it was pointing me in the direction, oh no, you had this. We're going to show you more. So,
So you said after this entire experience, strange
mhm.
things started happening. How did that start?
Well, the first thing that I noticed was the person prior to this death experience. I was not a spiritual individual. I didn't have any religious following. I figured if God, quote unquote, existed, I would meet him when I died. Just so happens that the way it went down. But if, for instance, if you were into crystals or something, I would just call you a rock person. If, yeah, I would call you woo. I wanted nothing to do with it. But when I returned, I had all this spiritual knowledge that I could not place. I remember the first shower I took after returning and just having this incredible knowledge of existence and our connection to everybody and my love for almost all things here, pretty much all things, including things like tables and chairs. It was just like this incredible loving feeling that I had. And before, I was a type A savage executive. I had no time for empathy or compassion or patience for people. And now I had all of this. So that was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was I stopped dreaming. The dreams became more visionary. They became almost real as real life, but in different realms and different areas. And I couldn't explain that. It was like I wasn't allowed to dream anymore, in a sense. I was living two lives. Then beyond that, I would start seeing orbs of light. I could feel the orbs of light coming, and I could also feel that the orbs of light were the very same consciousness that I had met on the other side through beings and whatnot. So I started to have all these recognition. Life had changed drastically, and what left was not what returned. So in those moments, I had to somehow try and put them in a box that I could continue life, but I just couldn't, because there was no explanation for these things happening other than that collapse, which is when I started reaching out to near death experience research studies and whatnot. I had been laying on my couch on Christmas Day and had opened YouTube on my phone. And in between all the guy videos of dirt bikes and mountain biking and jet skiing, there was one video that had a podcast interview with Dr. Jeffrey Long about near death experiences. And I thought, well, this is odd. What's it doing in my feed? And I clicked it. And when I watched it, it hit me like a tidal wave that it was probably real. So I actually reached out to his study, hoping that they would say, well, it wasn't. It wasn't a near-death experience. But the test was very thorough. I explained every detail of it over a day and a half, and only to receive, I guess it was a 4 rating from them, which was an exceptional near-death experience. So then I couldn't hide from it anymore. When that confirmation came through, all things changed. I started receiving psychic messages. I started feeling beings in rooms and things of that nature. Synchronicities, which I had never noticed before and didn't know anything about, with electronics and numbers and things, were everywhere. And I had no idea what these things were, but I would start to record them. And again, I had no spiritual material understanding for what we think of here. Like, what is a synchronicity? I had no idea. So as this stuff grew, things started changing. That information that I was given on the other side wanted to come out. So I was invited to a book club and I shared some of this information. And when I did, they all looked at me and said, do you understand what knowledge you have, like how in depth it is? And I had no idea. So it turns out I couldn't escape from it. I could not escape from the fact that I went from knowing nothing about spirituality to knowing a great deal within 3 hours. And that I had this draw to no longer work in a business environment. I just couldn't, which is very strange for me because I did very well. I became a C-level executive. So now all the career that I had, everything that I had done, I had an aversion to. It was like I could never take money from somebody again for a business or to manipulate money from somebody. So I knew I could never go back. I knew life had changed for me permanently. And in those moments, I understood that the agreement that I had made on the other side with the being that I had met to share the information on my return was what I was supposed to do. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Tell me a bit about this being that you met on the other side.
Yeah. So from what I understand with other near-death experiencers, we tend to see what welcomes us the most. So in my case, because I didn't have a spiritual background, I saw a beautiful, natural, heavenly landscape. And in this beautiful heavenly landscape with light coming through everything and just this overwhelming unconditional love and warmth everywhere, I eventually ran into a being who looked like a hiker that you would meet in the outdoors. And he was waiting for me on a rock. He had his arms and legs crossed and just dangling off of this rock. And when I met him, what I would say is eye contact, because I felt like I had a body, but I didn't notice that I had one. It was like he gave me a 3-hour conversation in one giant sphere of knowing. It was an instantaneous understanding that I had passed, a welcome home, a loving embrace. It just incredible support, love, warmth in all things, in all ways, instantaneously. Well, at that point, I also felt I recognized him, but it was like trying to recognize somebody you can't recognize. So I knew him, but I didn't know how I knew him. And as he came down off of that rock and stood next to me, he could feel that I had that wonder about who he was. And in that period, from his chest up to the top of his head, he started flipping through different personalities or different identities, male, female, young, old, Indian, Chinese. And I recognized all these personalities or these identities as I recognized him. And eventually he stopped on me. So I am looking at the person that just left, and his telepathic message to me is, I am you and you are me. And there was a knowing that came with that, that is, yes, reincarnation exists. We've been here many times, but it's also that we are so more connected to the other side in our lives here than we could possibly imagine. So who was the being? I think the being is a formless divinity that takes a form in all things. Maybe you can call that God if that's your word, or Jesus if that's your word, or just the ultimate flow of connectivity and a representation to welcome me. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of all things.
Isn't that interesting? Interesting.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that this being showed up in a form
Mhm.
basically that you would recognize, that would not
Yeah,
be overwhelming for you, or a form that would be
correct.
accepted by you. And I hear this a lot. So there's the case of David Ditchfield, who's been on this podcast as well as my other podcast, Radiate Wellness. And he talks about these beings. There was one that was in a black t-shirt and jeans,
Yeah,
someone
he
he would
looked like
recognize.
he just looked like a hiker. He was wearing hiking clothes. It was just somebody you would see on the trail and say hi to as you walked by.
He thought he maybe something was wrong with him because this was why is my angel showing up in a black t-shirt and jeans? And then there's the
Right.
story of Susan Walter, who's also been on both of the podcast, and she had a near-death experience at two of them, one at age 4 and one at age 6. She grew up on a farm, and so her near-death experiences were based around animals and
Yeah.
people under trees having family reunions, and all the animals could talk to her. Isn't that interesting that these beings will show up in a form that is very accepted by us? Oh, and I'm thinking of Dr. Eben Alexander as well, who you might know. And he had a being that was his sister, that
Yeah.
she was very acceptable to him. So interesting enough. Now, you had no background in any of this. It must have
Yeah.
been quite a shock for you.
No, because on the other side, I didn't feel anything but just the ultimate love. It felt
Mm.
more real there than here. It was before I had run into that being, I had no recollection of passing. I didn't know I had passed. I just felt normal. It wasn't until that being had given me this download that I understood I had passed. But even then, it was great. This is incredible. It's like taking off a metal shirt. It's just so freeing and welcoming and just incredibly loving. So there was no moment like, oh, but, or well, or why. There was no curiosity coming from my understanding or me. It was just complete surrender and acceptance. So even on my return, I now was given all of this information and this knowing, which solved any curiosity I might have had before I went. So I've never returned with the question of, well, why are we here? Or what's this about? It's like that was removed in a sense and just handed to me to give to others in talks or whatever I do, Zooms and one-on-ones. But I look at myself now as nothing more. I don't look at myself as an identity. I just look at myself as a conduit for whatever information that I was given.
Wow, that's beautiful. So, after this profound experience and after the realization of exactly what happened to you, how did you start to tell people?
So that was another synchronistic event. I had no plans of sharing it even after I found out. I figured I would write the book anonymously under a different name, and I had done my part of the agreement, which I had made on the other side before I returned. I had joined an online group to try and learn a little bit more about experiencers and what everything from UFO experiencers to psychics to tarot card readers, all the people that I never would have hung out with before. And through that group, they had asked me to tell a little bit about my story, and I was happy to because it was anonymous, it was through screen names. And one day somebody said, you should pick up a tarot deck and find out if you have some secret skill you don't know about that you returned with. And so I researched a tarot deck, knowing nothing about them, and ended up finding one in a bookstore here locally. When I entered the bookstore locally, which just happened to be across the street from my favorite brewery, which I had spent quite a bit of time at before dying.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and never knew the bookstore was here, a little esoteric bookstore. Anyway, I came in for the tarot deck and met the owner, who was 85 at the time, named Alma. And there was just this psychic message that hit me at the time. I like to call them bricks that get thrown at my head that you cannot avoid the message. And it was tell her. And so I introduced myself and told her a little bit about the story, waiting for her to flinch. And she didn't. And she was the first in person individual I told about the story. Returning a month later, I told her a little bit more. And she said, you agreed to share something when you returned. How do you plan on doing that? I said, oh, I'm going to write the book. And she just looked at me funny, like, I'm not convinced. How about you sit on a stool in front of 12 people and just tell the story? So I said no. I was not comfortable doing it. I was not comfortable. I figured everyone carries pitchforks and torches on their person, and I didn't want to expose myself to that.
Well, especially in
So,
Idaho, that's being a little trepidatious.
correct. So the third time I went into the bookstore, she convinced me to do it. At the time, I had a dog, my dog Badger, a Boston Terrier, who was dying. He was having some real, just bad issues, and he needed around the clock care. So here I had agreed to do a talk 2 weeks from a date where I had seen Alma. The day I went to cancel the talk because I couldn't find care for my dog was the day he passed. So I knew at that point that I was supposed to do the talk. So I did. I sat on a stool anonymously in front of a dozen people at which she invited. I told the story. She gave me a 3 hour time slot, and I thought, I'll be done with this in 10 minutes. And I ended up talking the full 3 hours, every detail about the experience without even looking at the clock. And I thought, well, that was odd too. And then everyone in the audience contacted me with questions and wanted to know more. And that talk led into a talk that same week, of which an author from Seattle had canceled a private dinner party with a number of guests in a home. And I was contacted to fill in. Can I tell my story in front of this group? And I thought, well, I told it once, so I might as well do it again. And from that first week in those two talks, I've now spoken to probably over 1,000 people, and I've been doing talks every other week since. So I don't charge anything. I don't charge ticket prices. I don't even charge for one-on-ones. I know that if I need something, it will be provided. And I just share what I experienced on the other side. And I've seen spiritual transformative experience. I've seen all kinds of stuff. So I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
I love that. I know my sister had been to one of these talks and she was very impressed. And she reached out and she said, Chris, you've got to get in touch with this guy because that's right up your alley. She says, everything that you've been telling, which was great confirmation. She said, everything you've been telling me and talking about, this guy's confirmed. It was a bit helpful for that because she was very, very religious and this was something a little bit different for her. So to
Yeah.
get confirmation for her was huge. This being that you met on the other side, are you still in contact? Are you still in touch with the other side?
Yeah, constantly. I don't know if it's uncommon or common with near-death experiencers, but I can be back in the experience, shutting my eyes and being back in it, like I never left. That being, I recognize that being as not just that being. I recognize that being in all the messages I receive. I recognize the being in orbs of light I see. I recognize the being in the bird that flies and sits on the windowsill while I'm reading a book. I recognize the being in all things. And that's why I refer to it as the formless divinity that takes a form just for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful. So tell me about these messages that you receive and the spiritual knowledge that you receive from
Yeah. again, it was telepathic and it was instant, but at the same time, it felt like it was drawn out, explained in a way, and given to me in a way that I know it could have been given to me at the snap of a finger, but it was shown to me in a way that I now know was showing me how to share it with others. So
Mm.
things about full circle truth, how really the only thing we can change here is perception, that free will isn't necessarily choice A or choice B. It's more of you are always choosing B. Do you understand why? Things like the intellect versus the heart, the ignorance versus the trust and understanding, surrender, why things happen in your life. They're not happening to you, they're happening for you. Shown that every existence here we think looks like a stock ticker symbol with high points and low points. But when you get to the other side, what you see is your life was always a high point. You never had a low point. It was your perception of low point or the emotion or the feeling or just not having the understand to know that everything here is a gift. I was shown consciousness in a way that I can understand that if you want to have a conversation with your doorknob, you can. It can hear you. It's all living around us. I like to say this is an illusion in a way where we're all wearing virtual reality glasses. And at the end of your existence, you will take them off and you will look around and you will understand that you never left. So this is kind of a fabric built on top of a foundation of which we all come from, the place where we all come from.
I agree 100%
Mhm.
that what we're living is really an illusion, but I love the way you put it. That we take off our virtual reality glasses and we realize we'd never left. And that's beautiful. That is wonderful. So you continue to work with people in groups and talking about these truths.
Mhm.
How does that work? Like who do you work with and how does that happen?
Anybody. I've never said no. So generally, I do a talk here at the small bookstore for anywhere between 30 and 50 people every other week. And I just share a little bit more of the experience, a little bit more of the knowledge I received. And I try to not remove things from people, but to give them the perspective of what they can expect when they cross over. Just an understanding that death isn't the end. The understanding that you are so loved more than you could possibly imagine. And not only that, but that love is in the room with you every day, all day, every second of your existence. I like to say God is in the room and it's holding your hand. You just can't feel it. And it's when you reach those moments where you can feel it, is when you reach an understanding of what this game that we play, this school that we're in, this illusion that we're a part of. And when you start to feel that, that's when your life changes. That's when the degree of your existence changes. And honestly, that's what God really wants. Doesn't need the worship, it needs acknowledgement. It just wants you to acknowledge it because when you acknowledge it, you're acknowledging what you are as well.
Mhm.
So I tend to do most of my talks around that piece of information, but I do get down into the nitty gritty of everything from vibratory states and more. But what I was shown on the other side can be boiled down to something very simple is you're loved and it's okay.
Right, right. Yeah, I do quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is a very specialized form of hypnosis. And doing that work, people get to see for themselves what
Yeah.
that state is like and being with their higher self and channeling their higher self. And the truth is, we don't have to have a near death experience. We don't have to be dead for 3 hours
Correct.
to
Correct.
connect. So,
Yeah.
what would you tell people about connecting with all there is?
I like to give people the example of a sunset. If you're on the beach and you're watching a beautiful sunset and you recognize beauty, in that moment you have surrendered to what you actually are, which is the awareness of the beauty. You're no longer male or female, you're not your name, you're not your age, you're not your sore knees. You are just the feeling of that experience. And to recognize what you are is to say, there is no piece of paper that I can slide across the table with a recipe that tells you how to enjoy a sunset. It's innate, it's within you, you're born with it. It's the recognition of beauty. And if you can shut your eyes and just feel that sunset for a second, you can realize that you carry your own personal medication around in your pocket every day, all day. Whether you're in a busy grocery line or you're having an argument with a spouse, you can shut your eyes and in one breath, one full breath in, big exhale through your mouth, feel yourself looking at that sunset again. And that's the real you.
It is beautiful. So many near-death experiencers come back from their experience with this knowledge of how love is and how it truly works. It sounds like it created a profound change within you.
Yeah, I would say 100% change. Most people don't recognize me or recognize what has come back. Most people just scratch their heads. But yes, very profound change.
Have you ever heard of the walk-in experience?
I have. The reason I don't think that is because I was shown this information. I feel like if I was a walk-in, I just would have came back with some knowing, but it was very clearly shown to me. So it was the same individual in a sense, but with the new improved body or new improved understanding. I like to say that that wild card type A, just crazy executive that didn't care about people was a necessary part of who I am now because I can see the contrast between the two. Whereas now I have full compassion for everybody and everything, that person did not. I can see that person in other people. So it helps me recognize we are all things at the end of the day. We are the lack of compassion and compassion. You just don't realize we live on half truths. We define a half truth for ourselves, not realizing that we are the whole. So both parts are necessary. I needed that person to be the person that I am now.
The contrast, yeah. Experiencing the contrast. So how did you start to tell your family and your close friends and everything? What did they think?
I didn't for quite some time. In fact, I was doing talks for probably a good few months before I had broached the family. And the interesting part about the close friends is I had a recovery period when I returned, a good 6 to 8 months where I really couldn't do anything. And my body was recovering from organ failure. And in that period, you watch the friends slowly disappear. And you have to ask yourself, well, why? Well, because I was that type of person. So I hung around those type of people. So it wasn't until months and months later that I would run into somebody in the grocery store and they would say, "Oh man, you look different." And I would go in for the hug instead of the high five, "Hey, how you doing, bro?" And they just felt something different on me. And as I've begun to tell some of those people who live in my community, they haven't been handling it well because they miss the wild man, the entertaining executive who was up for any adventure at any time. So it's interesting to see when you're sitting in that non-spiritual place, you tend to hang out with non-spiritual people. And it's a big ladder to climb to get to understanding when you haven't had an experience like I've had.
This is so true. So that leads me to the next question. Why you?
I don't know. I could say I make a joke sometimes that they just removed one more degenerate from the streets. At the same time, I also know that that contrast of my existence going from a place of zero love to a place of full love has allowed me to speak with just anybody, anywhere, anytime. I think if I was really spiritual and I had had the experience, I would still be missing the part of how do non-spiritual people live? What do they like? How do they integrate into society? How can I get a non-spiritual person to understand that spirituality even exists? So I think that is more the case than any particular reason.
Yeah. And you're writing a book now.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm finishing the manuscript this week.
That's beautiful. So it's just a full story of your experience. Do you go into your background before that too?
Absolutely. You get the full picture. You get the person you want to hate in the front end, and you get the person that is all love in the second half. But yeah, I talk about some of the messages I received, some of the warnings I received, some of the predictions that I've had that have come true, like the LA wildfires and some earthquakes and things. So yeah, it should be a good book, about 200 pages. So
It's wonderful. You have a publisher?
not yet. That's the next step.
I've got a good one for you.
All right.
They published Real Life Angel Encounters. So I'll send you
Great.
some information and make an introduction. Now, I do have another question about the healing, about your physical healing. You said you spent several months in recovery. Of course, organ failure is very serious. Sepsis is very serious.
Yeah.
And has your body completely healed from all of this through your experience?
No, I think I have healed to a point where I can't repeat the same life in a sense. There won't be 2-hour workouts a day and mountain climbing and expert level mountain biking and skiing, but I've healed more than well enough to continue to do the work that I'm doing. But yes, I was told that on the other side. I was given the choice to return or to stay.
Were you?
Yes. The being gave me, after my life review, I was given a choice whether to return or to stay. The caveat was if I chose to return, I would share the experience and share the information I was given. And I agreed to return, but I was given some warnings. One of the warnings was my recovery would be long and difficult, which I didn't understand when I returned why it needed to be long and difficult. I spent a solid year trying to just get well enough to eat again properly and function again. And during that time, I realized that the recovery was also part of my unfolding. So if I had come back perfectly healed with all this new information, I probably just would have written the book and just been done with it. But to have that year of synchronicities and the dreams and the experience and reliving life in a more spiritual way, it allowed me the time to unfold and understand that that recovery was also part of an entrance into something else.
That is amazing. Amazing. Is there anything else that you think is important for our audience to know?
No, I think ultimately the thing to know is you're just here to experience your existence. There's nothing to fix. You don't have to worry about anything. You're just here to experience it. And at the end of the day, you aren't judged. I was not, I was a person you'd want to judge, and even I was not judged. So at the end of the day, you can probably release some suffering knowing that you're loved no matter what you think you've done or what you think you should do.
Yeah.
You're unconditionally loved either way.
And you did go through that life review, which is an important part of
Yeah,
the experience. So we all
absolutely.
reckoning at the end. So before I let you go, though, can you tell us a bit about what that life review was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I was shown all the periods of my life where I would say I sat in ignorance versus understanding. It's why I say it's not whether you choose A or B, it's whether you are aware through the heart or the intellect or the ignorance of the mind. So everything from arguments with an ex-wife to how I treated people in the office, I was shown the effects and how they reverberate beyond just the person that you're interacting with. We're all so connected that one interaction doesn't stop there. It goes on and on and on and on. So I left that life review of the near death experience with this understanding that our ignorance versus our heart is what defines a well lived life or what defines the free will that we have. It wasn't whether I was always choosing A or always choosing B. It's was I choosing understanding? Was I living from the heart or not?
That is absolutely amazing and so profound. I can see that that alone would change you.
Yeah. Yes.
And you've got a website that is
Yes.
ashford.com. What can we find there?
You can find out a little bit about me. The story isn't there, but I have some blog posts up and some announcements about Zoom calls and whatnot. If anybody has a question, they can always reach me through the website, jonathanashford.com.
That is wonderful. And anybody in the Pacific Northwest, you are doing regular talks at, what is it, Inquire Within?
Inquire Within, and I got off the phone last night with New Zealand, on Australia the day before, Germany before that. I'm international at this point, just trying to help people when they need a little assistance.
How exciting. So connect with Jonathan at jonathanashford.com. The link will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Jonathan. It's been profound.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow and be sure to share this episode. The more people who know about this podcast, the more great story submissions we get. Have a story to share? Email your own real-life angel encounter to angelencounterspodcast@gmail.com or visit radiatewellnesscommunity.com/real-life angel encounters podcast. Or join our Facebook group and continue the discussion. Want to know what your angels and loved ones have to tell you? Schedule an appointment with me at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. A special thanks to James Wheeler for the original music and to Tiffany Baumgarten for the logo design.